Setting the Z height, the job origin, the job start, well, it's sort of all the same thing, and in today's episode I'm going to show you a few tips on how to set it up in different scenarios. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of James Dean Designs. If you're new to the channel, love laser or CNC, make sure you hit that little subscribe button in the corner to get all the latest tips, tricks, tutorials and reviews. Now, twice in one day I got asked exactly the same question. How do you set the Z height correctly when doing a bit change? For example, on a 3D relief carving where you have to do two separate passes. And it's a really good question. We're going to cover that in today's episode. We're going to start off at looking some of the different ways to set the Z height, give you a few different tips depending on whether you are machining the whole piece of material or just doing one specific area. I'll then move on to showing you how to set the Z height when you are doing a bit change in order to get it as accurate as possible. Now, I'm doing it on this machine today, but the principles apply to any size machine, whether it's a 3018 or something like a 4-foot machine. So let's zoom in and take a closer look at the setup, and I'll share some of my tips with you. So in your CNC software, when designing your job, it will typically ask you where you're setting the Z origin from, either the top of the material or the top of your bed. Now, for the purpose of this video, we are just focusing on setting the Z position on the top of the material. There are a couple of advantages to doing it from the bed itself, but most people I know, including myself, just always do it from the top of the material. Now, the two most common methods for setting the Z0 height is either using a Z probe or what is known as the paper method. This is where you place a piece of paper under the bit, lower it down slowly, pulling the paper back and forth, and as it starts to drag on the paper, you know it is just about to touch the top of the material. No matter what anybody tells you, the Z probe method is the most accurate and repeatable method for setting the Z height. The paper method is essentially just a bit of guesswork. Lots of people use it, but as I say, that is the most consistent way to set your Z height. If you don't know how to set a Z probe up, there is a link in the corner to a video I've done previously about how to set this up in Candle or UGS. So we'll move the Z probe out of the way for the time being. Now, most of the time you want to set the Z0 height where you are machining on the material. So for example, if we were machining in the middle of this block, we would aim to set the Z height somewhere in the middle. Yes, most of the time your material should be a consistent thickness, but occasionally it may not. So aim to set the height wherever you are about to start the job. If the origin of your job is in the center of the material, obviously this is quite convenient because your bit is bound to be somewhere in that region. But let's say you are starting the job on the corner of the material. Now, I try not to set the Z height here, partly because corners can sometimes taper off, and it's also difficult to get a flat reading. So what I would typically do is jog the bit so far into the material and then take a reading somewhere there. So usually you want to aim for, the bigger, flatter areas in order to set the Z0 height. Now, any decent control software will allow you to set your Z height in a separate place than where the job actually begins. So again, for example, if your job was beginning in the bottom left hand corner but you wanted to set your Z height over here, navigate over to there, and instead of using the reset 0 function, just select the reset Z function and it will automatically take the reading from there whilst keeping that as your X and Y 0. So that's the fairly easy part for setting the Z0 height if you are just doing a single pass. But what if we need to change the bits over to do multiple passes on the same job? Well, let's rearrange this setup, bring a new piece in, and I'll try and explain different methods for that. So this is a 3D relief carving I did earlier in the year of a clock, and the actual piece on the outside is the offcut from this job. Now, the issue comes when you are doing a rough cut and then going to change bit. Well, normally you've already machined most of the area that you are working on. So when you come to drop a new bit in, well, it would start from much lower down if you tried to set the Z height in that same position. So this is one of the first tips really. If you are doing a job like this, where you've got a bit of blank space around the outside, even if there are clamps in position, set the Z height somewhere that is not going to be machined. So in this scenario, for example, I would set the Z height maybe in this corner, do the first passing with the roughing bit, then when I came to drop the tapered ball nose in, I would set it from that exact same spot as well, just to guarantee that it was consistent in the height that it was set from. Now that's all good, but let's say the job is held down by blue tape and CA glue and you are machining the entire surface of your material. So let's take this away and talk about another option. So use your imagination a little bit here. We've just completed the roughing pass on this job. The entire surface has been touched by the bit, so therefore we can't set a consistent Z height again off this piece of material when we're about to drop in the tapered bullnose bit. So one of the things I like to do, no matter what material I'm using, is keep some sort of offcut. It doesn't need to be big, it can just be like 1 inch by 1 inch, but ultimately if you have an offcut of material of the same thickness, you can bring that in, set the Z height accurately off that, and it should then match obviously the material that you've just been machining and get the same consistent results. Now one small thing to factor in, if you are using clamps or something, this can be okay. If you are using something like blue tape and CA glue, the blue tape and CA glue may lift your material up slightly, so you may have a fraction of a difference between this material and that material. Obviously the easiest way around it is to stick some blue tape onto this just to mirror the thickness of that between the two pieces, but ultimately it's going to get you pretty close if not perfect. So if you have a scenario where you're going to be machining the entire piece of material and you don't have a spare offcut, well, how do we get around that? Let's do another changeover. We'll bring that scrap piece in as an example that I was just using. So let's take it, we're going to be machining all of this area and there is no way we can use an offcut to set the consistent Z height. So me personally in this scenario, I would set the height of the Z to begin with of something that is more consistent. You can either use the bed itself or bring in something like a block of wood or a block of metal, place that at the side of your job, jog your spindle over and take that as your 0 point for the Z start. So basically lower the spindle down and run the Z probe on there so you know that that is 0 for the Z axis. Now once you've done that, bring it back over to your material, keep an eye on the readout within your control software and lower it back down until it touches the top of your material. Now at this point you will have a discrepancy in the numbers. So for example, let's say this wood is minus 5 millimeters, so it's 5 millimeters lower than the height of the metal block. Keep a note of that measurement. Then reset your 0 for your bit at the top of your material and do the job as you normally would. It will machine everything, take a top layer off. Now, when you come to drop your next bit in, do a similar process. Jog it over to here, lower it down and take the 0 off the top of the metal block. Then bring it back to your material, lower it down that minus 5 millimeters that we were using in this scenario, and then reset the Z height at that point. It will just guarantee that those two bits were set at the exact same position because you used something else that was consistent instead of the material that had already been machined. And that technique then can work no matter how many bit changes you've got to do, whether it's 1, 2, 3 or 4. If you're setting the Z height of something else consistently and measuring the difference between that first cut, well, it guarantees then that every bit you can put in after that point can be set to the same height. So there we have it. We've covered a few different ways to set your Z height and some more advanced ways when changing bits over. I hope you've learned something useful from the video. If there's techniques I haven't covered in this, then let me know in the comments section down below. I love to learn new things. Thank you all very much for watching. If you found it useful, make sure you give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Final thanks goes to my patrons. If you want to get involved for one-to-one help, giveaways and early access to content, then check out the Patreon links in the description area below. I will see you all on the next episode.